Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate, they write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO and I have a confession to make. Early in my career, I didn't see the value of networking, or rather, my introversion convinced me of that. But today, 20 years later, I think my network is my most valuable resource and I truly treasure every person who's in it. In this episode, I'm talking with Joe Picini about how he leveraged his network following an unexpected layoff in early 2004. This episode is full of great advice and insights, as well as some vulnerable moments. Hopefully, it will be helpful to you whether you are potentially looking at being laid off, looking for a new job, or just looking for a reason to put effort into networking. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, a podcast that empowers higher ed marketers to bring innovation, creativity, and excellence to their work. I'm your host, Jaime Hunt. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher educational professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. I'm so happy and grateful to be here with Joe Picini. He brings over a decade of experience in higher ed marketing and enrollment strategy. He started his career at NYU as an admissions counselor before transitioning to NYU's enrollment marketing team, which was under the leadership of a previous guest, Joey Schmidt. You might want to check out his episode. It's actually a listener favorite on building a student journey map. Joe has worked at a digital marketing agency as a strategist, a director of enrollment marketing at an art school in Brooklyn, and he currently serves as the director of recruitment marketing at New Jersey Institute of Technology, supporting their online portfolio. And throughout his career, he's had the chance to work with all student types from pre-college through master's programs and all degree formats. And we're here to talk a little bit about a recent experience that Joe had with being laid off at that art school in Brooklyn. And I guess we'll just first of all welcome you to the show, Joe. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Been a long-time listener and huge fan of yours, and it's an honor to be here with you.
It's so great. And when Joe pitched this episode to me, I was absolutely so thrilled that he was willing to come in and share his story, because hopefully it will be really helpful to not just people who are working in higher ed, but other marketers who have experienced a layoff. So, Joe, can you start by just sharing your story of your layoff? What was your immediate plan of action? Like what happened to you during that period?
So, there's never a convenient time to get laid off by any stretch of the imagination. And as I've gotten more distance from it, it's either the worst or the best thing that's happened to me, depending on the day. But just to kind of zoom out for a brief second to talk about my timeline. So, in February of this past year, I had a conversation with my supervisor that pretty much hinted that my position was going to be on the chopping block. It wasn't until about mid-March that the separation actually happened. And then just to share a little bit more about the timeline, I started searching for a job in February after that initial conversation, probably applied to somewhere between like 60 and 100 positions in
Wow.
total over my search. And um, by March, I was getting like maybe one a week. So at least going into that layoff, I had some kind of hope that there was a light on the other side of this. But then by April is when things kind of really picked up, where there was 1 week where I had 4 interviews in one week.
Wow.
Um, I think in total there were 6 positions that I was invited to interview for. Every single one of them came from my network.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't get a single call back from any of the cold applications I applied to, which is why I feel so strongly about talking about the importance and the value of the network, just because it really showed up for me in an incredible way.
That's amazing. When you were laid off and you applied for all of those positions, were they mostly higher ed positions or were you looking outside higher ed as well?
That's a great question. I definitely wanted to cast a wide net, and it just kind of going back to like the process question. So when I first got the news in March that I was getting laid off, that my position was being eliminated, you know, you're definitely in shock mode. And luckily, because I had a chance to know that this was kind of coming, I re-listened to Bryce's podcast about his experience and kind of had those key questions teed up to go for that conversation with HR. My first question was, what's going to happen to my team? And luckily, they were safe. I really care about the folks that I worked with, and I just wanted to make sure that at least there was some sort of bright spot in this experience. And then I went through the 3 questions that Bryce recommended, which I think were could just reconfirming that you're not being fired for cause, confirming that you're eligible for rehire, and then just like understanding like when the benefits run out. And then, called my husband immediately after that conversation, packed up my things, and was kind of on my way. That first week, I didn't do anything. I just really kind of focused on just processing what had happened. And for anyone who has gone through a layoff, they'll know like it is a trauma in terms of just feeling shame, feeling fear about not knowing exactly what's going to happen next, anger. There's a lot of different things that go through there. The next sort of phase of it after I was processing it, I'd say, was a self-reflection period where I was looking at different career opportunities. So thinking about what do I want? And I think there are a couple different dimensions. So I was thinking about it through like a content perspective. So like what kind of work do I want to be doing? What kind of causes do I want to be affiliated with? A process, like how do I want my work to feel? A growth, thinking through like what are the things that I want to develop new skills in, and then also an environment. And through that process, I was looking at positions in student success, which is different than anything that I had worked in before. I was looking at healthcare positions, internal communications positions, even K through 12, both as a college counselor and enrollment there. And in a lot of those different areas, which we can get into more, it was different folks from my network who were like in those areas that kind of helped teach me more about what the actual day-to-day experience was in those fields.
Hmm. So you were kind of open, kind of cast a pretty wide net.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to make sure I was casting a wide net when I was looking for what might be my next step. I wanted to be careful that I wasn't using this just as an opportunity to stay on the same exact path that I was going on. I wanted to take the time, because I had the time, to really reflect and think about like, okay, yes, I've been working in enrollment marketing for a long time. There's a lot of things that I enjoy here. Are there other areas where my same kind of skill set might be valued? And ultimately, I landed up in a position pretty similar to the type of work that I was doing before. But I'm excited that it's at a public institution, which I haven't had the chance to work at yet,
Hmm.
and I deeply believe in the student population there. So I'm really excited about this next opportunity.
Were there any tools or resources that you used to kind of process through what kind of work you wanted to explore in the next chapter?
My cousin, who's kind of like more like a sister to me, she's like a pro at just like thinking about what brings you joy and like how do you want to really like focus your efforts. So that whole framework I was talking about in terms of content, process, growth, environment, going through like a guided exercise, just thinking through for each of those dimensions, what my answers were for those, and could I see them possibly changing in the future? Another tool that she recommended that she really enjoyed was, there's a book and a quiz. I think it's called The 6 Types of Working Genius. So I didn't read the book, but I did do the quiz, which you can get online for a small fee. It didn't like teach me anything like groundbreaking about myself, but it does help kind of put into words things that you've probably thought about yourself. So the 6 dimensions, there's an acronym which I think stands for widget. And then what I like about this tool compared to other ones is not only does it tell you like where your energy areas are, it also tells you where your energy drains are.
Mm,
And that was something different than other similar tools about like personality assessments that I've seen before, because it can kind of help you think about like, well, what frustrates you and how do you want to like make sure you're not doing that type of work. And it's also eye-opening thinking about it from an interpersonal perspective of, okay, if people's strengths are the things that frustrate you, that also helps you think about like, okay, well, what are the dynamics at play there?
that's interesting. It sounds like your cousin's very wise.
Oh, she is. She's much, much smarter than me.
Well, hopefully she's listening. You mentioned that your interviews all came from folks that were in your network. How did you leverage that network? How did you reach out to people? How did you connect with people? How did you choose who you wanted to reach out to?
I took a wide approach to how I was thinking about my network. So I think there were 5 or 6 different categories, I guess we can put it through. The biggest one was companies that I've worked at, right? So thinking about people who had firsthand experience partnering with me at any of the jobs that I had before. Um, a couple ones that maybe aren't as expected are agencies that I worked with. So
Mm,
on the client side, working at a higher ed institution, there are countless different higher ed agencies that I've interacted with, account managers or strategists at those companies that I interacted with. So if there were positions that I was interested in, not every time, but I'd reach out to the account managers at those agencies and be like, hey, is this school one of your clients? And if so, like, do you know anyone? This is a position I'm looking at. Would love to kind of see if there is information there. The other category that might be less expected, because I was also at an agency myself at one point, was reaching out to some of the clients that I worked with and
mhm.
had really strong relationships with. So they also can kind of like, in both instances, they could vouch for my work ethic because we had worked together collaboratively on those different projects, either on the client side or the agency side. And, you know, sometimes it was a specific posting that I found and wanted to see if they can help connect. And they often did put in a referral if they were able to, or at least facilitate a warm transfer. And sometimes they didn't, which is also totally fine and expected. Um, a few of the other ones were LinkedIn network, which is just more broadly. So at one point, after I kind of like licked my wounds a bit about the shame of how I was feeling, I did post publicly on LinkedIn about, being on the job search. And that post went viral by my standards. It reached, I think, like over 13,000 people.
Wow.
And and from that, it helped bring more people to me without me even having to try. So folks would reach out, people who had also been laid off, to kind of like talk about their experiences, which was really helpful for me, just seeing, the success that they've had on the other side of things. Others with like actual job opportunities, which was incredible. A lot of folks who, like yourself, who have podcasts, I reached out to them as well. And, everyone was so helpful. You were so helpful, Jaime. Allison Tercio from the application, both Mallory and Seth from Higher Ed Pulse, like so many of the Enrollify network folks were so willing to help in whatever way that they could, which was unexpected but really appreciated. I'm a big podcast person, so I'm listening to all of your podcasts on my commute, and just it was so affirming to see how like warm and open everyone was to helping out and offering whatever they could to help support me on this journey.
That's one of the things I know I've talked about this before, but the higher ed marketing community in general is an incredibly generous community, but I feel like the Enrollify community is like especially generous. And I recently, as quit my job to start a consulting firm. And there's absolutely no way I could have done that without my network. And it was, a lot of the same people that you mentioned that I did outreach to, but just people just across the gamut. I worked my network back when I was first considering this idea in November of 23. And it was so amazing, the support and encouragement that I got from folks. And so I'm not surprised that that's the reaction that you got, but that makes me really happy that, people took extra steps, introduced you to people, found people in their network that could help you out. That just makes me so happy. And did you find that, you know, were any of those connections fruitful? I mean, you said you got your job through one of those connections. That's
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah. So I'd say so how I got my position that I'm currently in, I found the job, the director for recruitment marketing position, posted on one of the message boards, and it listed the title of the person who would be the direct supervisor. So then I went on LinkedIn, found out who that person was, and then I saw that they had a mutual connection with me, and it just so happened to be the AVP at NYU when I used to work there, who worked with my current supervisor at another institution. They both since moved on to different institutions. So I just sent him a LinkedIn notes and like, hey, I'm applying for this job. I see you're connected to this person. Do you know them? And would you be comfortable putting a word in for me? And he said, yes, absolutely. And at that time, I was pretty junior at NYU. I had the benefit of having my little cubicle like right outside of his office. So, when we were approving different marketing materials and things like that, we'd always go through him. So like he had a general sense of my work and my work ethic, but it's not like we had a lot of opportunities to partner at his level. But he put in that good word, and I know that really helped get me that first conversation, and that it went a really long way having that endorsement from the hiring manager to ultimately selecting me. And honestly, it also helped me a lot too, knowing that the AVP worked with my current supervisor before. It made him more of a known quantity in terms of like management style and things like that. So it was really appreciated. And I hadn't talked with that AVP probably in, gosh, I don't even know, at least 4 years, if not more. Right. So I think my takeaway from that is networking can feel like this really like weird and gross thing. And I remember, especially when I was first out of college, I used to hate the idea of networking.
Mhm.
But it's really just about like relationship building, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, some of it takes time, right? Like you have to be out in the world in order to like build those relationships and those connections. Um, but like every single new connection that you make is like an opportunity in the future. And you'd be surprised how, like you mentioned, how willing people are to help when you're in need.
Absolutely. And I felt the same way. It was like networking. When I first started my career, I didn't want to go to the networking functions because I was like, this isn't it it's like it felt shady to me or something, like you're just building the relationship to potentially have somebody you can ask for something from in the future, but it's such a two-way street, and there's been times when, I've been able to help people get a job or help people, like there's been agencies that have been like, "Hey, do you know a person at this school? We're doing a pitch, like, would you put in a good word?" or whatever, and it feels so good to help people, and I like to think most people feel that way. I mean, it sounds like from your experience that most people feel that way. And so if you think about it as like this reciprocal relationship where you're giving as much as you're taking, I think that makes it, if you've been hesitant to do networking, I think that makes it so much better. And if you think about like, hey, I want to outreach, like Joe had outreach to me before he had been laid off with some questions. And I think I connected you with my husband to talk about online
Yeah.
marketing and stuff. Like just do it, like, right? Like, the worst somebody can do is ignore your LinkedIn message or just say like, "Yeah, I don't have time." And then you just move on. But, having that network and having somebody who can put something out there for you, in the future is fantastic. And then even better, I think, is being able to help someone that comes to you for assistance. It's just totally worth it. I want to pivot a little bit because I know I know there's a lot of people out there who've been laid off or who are afraid they're going to get laid off because the fall semester enrollment numbers at a lot of schools are looking rough. And I think there's going to be a lot of cutbacks happening in higher education, unfortunately. And being laid off can be so difficult, as you said, for your mental health. And it can make you feel, like you said, shame, fear, anger. And, I have been working with someone on a mentoring level who has been laid off, and they've really been struggling. They've been laid off for about 9 months, and they've really been struggling to kind of deal with the emotions that come with it. How have you, or how were you, I guess now, now you've gotten a job, but how were you able to maintain your mental health during that difficult period of time?
Yeah, I think that is such an important question. And, a couple years ago during the Great Resignation, there was just so many opportunities for people to find jobs. And, I'm seeing the same thing you are in terms of whether it's in the education tech space or agencies or other, institutions just closing down altogether, like what we saw with
Yeah.
UArts in Philadelphia. There are so many people looking for jobs and not enough jobs to go around. And one of the hardest things for me was going from having a very structured work day to then all of a sudden just having a blank page. So one of the things that was really important for me, I don't think I did a great job of this every time, but trying to just create some sort of schedule or structure to the day, whether it's like blocks for searching for interviews or, applying, writing cover letters, what have you. That was something that was helpful. Um, for me, I try to make Wednesday a no job search day and just do things that brought me joy. So that could look like going to the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens and just like walking around. It could be scheduling a lunch date with a friend who I hadn't seen in a really long time, or a mentor or former, you know, eh, supervisor that I really respected and just wanted to like, get their take on things in general and kind of help, fix my crown a little bit in terms of build that confidence back up. So that was something that was really important for me, just in terms of creating some kind of balance to that. The other thing I would mention is, there's only so many new jobs that get posted a day. And the trap I found myself falling into was I would search and search and search. Like, so the first week after the layoff, when I'm like actually looking, of course, there's a ton of jobs to
Hmm.
find. But after that, it really does become a slow trickle. So just recognizing that and not just sitting at your computer staring at a job board for 8 hours, hitting refresh, just being like aware of that was important. The most important thing for me as it relates to mental health was recognizing that I am someone who gets a lot of validation from the work that I do and a lot of value out of the work that I do. And one of the things that really was kind of a wake up call for me in this situation was this thing that I poured so much of myself into being taken away from me pretty unexpectedly. If I hadn't had other things in my life to find energy from, whether that's friends, family, hobbies, it could have been a lot worse of a situation. When I think about this situation, the biggest joke of the whole thing was just like the timing of it. There is never a good time to get laid off. There's never a convenient time. But my husband and I had been trying to start a family for about 3 years now via surrogacy, and the best laid plans always go awry. And for our situation, we had a couple different attempts that did not work out. And in February, whatever that Wednesday was, we transferred an embryo. And then on that Thursday, so literally the next day, that's when I found out that my job was likely going to be on the chopping block.
Wow.
And you just have to laugh, because if you don't laugh, you're going to cry.
Right.
The reason I say why the layoff is either the best thing that's ever happened to me or the worst thing that's ever happened to me depending on the day, is because since I am the type of person that gets a lot of personal satisfaction and value out of my work, and honestly, like my job title and the places that I'm working at, if I didn't have this great thing in my life, which is this, potential for starting a family and having a baby, if I didn't have that to focus on, I think I would have had a much harder time processing and dealing with the layoff, because that literally was where I was investing so much in my personal energy, just this job and this career.
Hey there, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Higher Ed is facing a leadership crisis. The demands on today's college and university leaders are skyrocketing, and talent is leaving the industry at an unprecedented rate. New leaders like you are emerging, but no one is getting the proper training to be successful. Well, Enrollify is here to change that. Our new course, Lessons in Leadership, taught by Dr. Carrie Phillips, will prepare you to be a confident, empathetic, and effective leader. From systems thinking to adaptive leadership, building culture to handling difficult decisions, this comprehensive online course is perfect for new and aspiring leaders. Don't wait. The course starts September 9th, and for a lucky group of 26 students, we have the option to add interactive sessions with Dr. Phillips for personalized guidance. Visit enrollify.org to learn more.
Yeah, I hear that so much. And as long as you're being vulnerable, I will be a little bit too. Early in my career, after I worked at a newspaper, and then I went to a small boutique agency, and then I went back to newspapers, and then I went into higher ed. But when I was at that small boutique agency, I had to go out on a medical leave. And during the time that I was on medical leave, the agency was sold. And the new owners, because there was sort of an open endedness to my medical leave, they were like, we're just going to like eliminate that position and move on. And I was fortunately still protected because I was still protected in terms of getting, the healthcare and everything paid for, but I didn't. It was essentially being laid off, and it was a very dark time for me. And I felt as though I would never bounce back from it. I felt as though I had lost my identity because I was associating my identity with having this job. And I was very depressed, and I fell into a pretty deep depression. And this all happened almost exactly around 9/11. So
Wow.
it was just like dark days in our country, dark days in my life. And um, this sounds terrible, but my grandfather had passed away about 6 months before that. And I spent a lot of time with my grandma, helping her with sorting through memory books and just being there for her because she hadn't been alone. They'd been married 60 years. Like she hadn't been alone in her life. And so being there for her and pouring myself into just like being there for my grandma, that is what kind of got me through the whole situation. And I now look back and say, like, and I wish I could tell everybody that's going through a layoff that it feels like the worst thing ever and that you're never going to recover from it. And I just think like there's time, it's not going to destroy your life. Like time will happen and you will get back on your feet or you'll shift to a different industry. That might be the best thing that ever happened to you. It ended up being the best thing for me because I went back to newspapers, and ended up working in higher ed. And the agency, I didn't, as much as I loved a lot of things about the job, our clients were not industries that I was passionate about. So I wasn't passionate about the work that I was doing. And so in retrospect, I remember telling my sister, I think this was the best thing that ever happened to me. And she was really upset because I was very, like, she knew I was in a depression. But that's when I started to come out of that depression, when it was like, a job doesn't define who you are. It doesn't define your worth. It doesn't define your value. What defines all of that is up to you. And it's like, how are you helping other people? I mean, I think the purpose of life is to help each other. Part of that lesson was learned during that time because I made it through that simply because I was helping somebody else with something. So I guess I don't talk about that time in my life a lot because when I think about how depressed I was, it just makes me feel very um, emotional. But I really want listeners who are in a position of a layoff, or even, you can be fired and still have, there's nothing. Not having a situation where you get along with your boss, or maybe you've made a mistake or whatever, and you've been fired, not laid off, you still have worth and value, and your life will get back on track. Just like Joe was saying, find the things that get you through it, and lean into your relationships. I think that's one of the things I really like about what you're saying is that, you had mentors and connections that really helped you fix your crown and helped you remember that your job doesn't define you. I love that.
Yeah, and it wasn't just people that were my mentors. When I did that public LinkedIn post, I'd say the first wave of folks who reached out to me were successful people who had experienced a layoff at one point in their career, but were now doing great things. And the kindness and generosity that these literal strangers, I had never met any of these folks, showed me in that moment, where they're talking about, like, they understand exactly what it feels like, it will be fine. And they were living proof, at least 3 or 4 of them, that there is a life after this. And it may feel like, exactly like you said, it may feel like the worst thing that's ever happened to you right now, but it's not. And you will be fine. And you will go on to something that is even better for you, that you don't even know what that thing is yet. It's one thing to hear from people who know you, and can speak to the work that you do, and sort of know the value that you've brought in other arenas. But hearing that from someone, that empathy from someone who doesn't even know you, but has been through a shared experience, that I think is one of the things that's sticking with me the most, even to this day.
I hope if you're listening to this and you haven't been laid off, I hope that this kind of inspires you for how to be empathetic and helpful to the people that do reach out to you, because I think um, Joe is sharing some really important insight here about how it feels to have a relative stranger tell you that you're going to be okay. Um, Yeah, I'm starting to feel a little emotional. I'm really, like, happy that your network was able to be there for you, and I'm curious about, how did you what made you think to tap into your network versus, just either try to figure it out on your own, or, mope around, which was my choice for dealing with it. What made you tap in? And I didn't have a network at that point. I was very early in my career.
Yeah, the bravest thing that anyone can do is ask for help. And I firmly believe that. And it's not easy asking for help. So for me, it was baby steps, right? So I started with the people who were those mentors, and those, like, people that I was comfortable enough, while the wounds were very fresh, to be vulnerable with. And through those conversations, just kind of helped me kind of, like, get my feet under me. Um, like I mentioned earlier, networking is not something that comes easy to me. But when you find yourself in a situation where you need to find a job, right? I was surprised at my own capability of just being fearless in terms of reaching out to people and seeing what could happen. And, as you mentioned earlier, the worst thing they could do is say no, and that's fine. So you know, uh, there are certainly examples of where reaching out to my network paid off and led to one of those 6 job interviews that I mentioned. I'm actually most proud of the instances where it didn't turn
Mm.
into a job opportunity. And I want to share them just in case they're helpful for other people as they're thinking about, their own situation. Um, so I knew one of the things through that, like, self-reflection was that I knew that I wanted to try and find a public university to work at, because I hadn't done that before. And I deeply believe in the student population, and just thinking about student success work, like that work is happening at public universities. So, I got my master's degree in integrated marketing. The new dean at the school that I got my master's from used to be a high-ranking position at the City University of New York system. I had never met this person. This person would not know me from Bob. And I just sent a cold email to her and said, "Hi, I graduated from this master's program from your university that you're currently the dean of. I'm looking for job opportunities, trying to make a pivot into the City University of New York system. You came from there in your previous role. Is there anyone that you could recommend that I reach out to?" And she gave me the name of one of her former friends and colleagues at the CUNY system. I reached out cold on LinkedIn, mentioned the dean's name, and that they said that I should speak with them. And they actually met with me, and we
That's
had this
awesome.
great conversation. It didn't like lead to a job, but I'm just really proud of myself of like thinking outside the box and kind of like seeing that through. And every new conversation is a new relationship that you're adding to your book as well.
I'm so proud of you. Like that's something that I sit here as, you know, someone who has a podcast and has started a business and whatever, feeling like that would be very intimidating to me to do. And I just like admire so much the courage that it took to do that. And it's so weird that it takes courage, but it absolutely does. Like and I have someone who used to work for me who would probably be like, that doesn't take any courage. I would do that. And like they're like the most extroverted person I've ever known. They're like, I would call the president of the United States and see if he could help me. Like, but I think for most of us, like that's a tough thing to do. So I really admire you for doing that. And and I also think about when I was in college, I temped one summer for a place called Michael's Foods. And the marketing director there, her name was Heather. And I remember she would get like these letters because this I'm old, okay? So she would get these letters in the mail with people like cold wanting to come work for her. And I remember my job was to like take the mail that she wrote and stuff it and stamp it or whatever. And she wrote back to every single person. And at the end of the card, she had a note that said something like, um, give to others what you wish would be given to you in terms of like grace or advice or whatever. And I remember that has stuck with me. That was probably 1995, 1996. That's like, you guys know how old I am now. But that was so long ago, but it has stuck with me that whole time. This idea of that dean was probably super busy, was probably like, had student requests in her inbox, had faculty demands in her inbox. I mean, deans are super busy, but that person understood that there was value in helping somebody. And that just makes me so happy. This is such an uplifting episode about such a serious topic.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just really important to pay it forward for sure. And I've already had the opportunity to have similar conversations with friends and colleagues who have also been laid off, from the other side of the equation as well. And it's just so, we just got to take care of each other
Yeah.
is really what it comes down to. And yeah, I just couldn't agree more.
Life is really hard. Like this whole journey that we have, however many times we get to go around the sun, life is really, really hard. And if you can take 2 minutes out of your day to help someone, if you can make the time to have coffee with someone, to let somebody pick your brain or whatever, do it. We're all so, 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 so busy, but you know, just even if it's like, I don't have time to meet with you, but I can point you to someone that I think might be able to help you, or I can point you to a resource or something, at least be doing something like that. Um, so I understand you have a pretty big network and you've made a lot of asks of that network in the last year. How do you work to make sure that you have mutually beneficial relationships with people? So it's not just I reach out to you when I need help and that's the only time you ever hear from me. What do you do to kind of keep that going in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think it's a really important question, and there needs to be that reciprocity. Absolutely. I would say that every time that you reach out to someone doesn't necessarily need to be for an ask or an opportunity. I think about it through life events or life triggers. So you start a new job. If there's a small set of people who were your mentors or people that you care about, you reach out and like, hey, week one at the new job, here's how it's going. That's just a way to like stay top of mind, and engage with them in a way that's like you're genuinely interested in sharing things like your successes and your happiness. And more often than not, that'll prompt that person to also respond in a similar way and share a life update on their part. So that's one way that I think has proven successful. Um, Another way is just like asking questions, right? So I've done this with you. I've done this with other folks as well. Like if you hear something, whether it's on a podcast or at a conference that you go to, follow up with them afterwards and be like, hey, this thing that you said really is interesting to me. I'd love just to talk more about it. Whenever I've started a new job, I reach out to people in my network that I feel like have similar types of roles and just say, hey, I'm new in this role. I got a lot of questions. I don't know what I'm doing. I would love just to hear a little bit about what's worked for you. Or sometimes it's like, this is a challenge that I'm experiencing in this role. Um, if you have some perspective that you think is relevant, would love just to kind of like talk about it. And those types of conversations, I guess you could say that there is an ask because you're asking for their advice. But again, like I truly believe people just want to help people.
Mhm.
And that's the authentic way that is only going to cost them a little bit of their time, where you can engage on a topic and both come away with a deeper understanding of whatever that thing is. And that certainly to me has been very valuable when I've been on either end of that equation.
I will say as someone who is a person that gets asked I mean, like almost daily. Um, I will say a couple of things. One, the folks that comment a lot on my posts on LinkedIn or reshare my posts on LinkedIn or pop into my messages just to be like, "Hey, I loved your episode with JS Stansel. It was great." And they don't have an ask in that moment. Those people are top of mind all the time. And so it's like when they show up, it's like I feel like I have a relationship with you because we've had some back and forth before this. And I think that's really good way to stay engaged with people that you might want to ask for advice down the road or you might want to ask for help down the road. Another thing, as someone who does a lot of public speaking and speaking at conferences, go up and talk to the person after. Go there's nothing brings me greater joy than at the end of the session having somebody come up and say, "I have another question about what you said," or I had somebody say, "Have you?" I recently spoke about AI, and they were like, "I used it in this particular way. Have you ever tried that?" Or whatever, and exchange cards and follow up with an email. That really means something to us as speakers. Like I'm putting my whole heart and soul and life into putting together these presentations and having somebody come up afterwards, even to just say like, I really loved your presentation. I'm Joe. I would love to connect or whatever. That means a lot to people. And so I think if you're early career and you're like, how do I build this network? Go to conferences, talk to the speaker afterwards, comment on people that you admire, respect, or whatever, comment on their posts. Just be really, really active in the community, and you'll find your network growing like just right before your eyes. I set out in 2017. I was like, I am going to really hone in on my network. And back then it was Twitter. And I was like, I am going to spend at least a half an hour every day commenting on people's things, retweeting people's things, engaging with people on Twitter to build a community. And it was like it was life changing. It was life changing to do that. So taking the time to do that. I mean, look at Joe. Like he's worked his network and he's got a job. Like that's life. Having a job is a life change. It's a big thing. So do it. I love it. Um, as we're looking at, wrapping up, I would love to hear how this experience may have impacted how you think about work and how you think about you in relationship to work.
Yeah, I think, it truly was a life-changing experience, going through being laid off and, finding this new job. And it just helps you reprioritize things. And there's nothing wrong with working hard and doing work that you're proud of. But I've been reflecting on this experience and trying to acknowledge that there's so much more to life than work.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was even you in a recent LinkedIn post. We work to live, we don't live to work, and just like keeping that in mind about there's so much more to life than just this one thing. And like, yes, do your best work, but there are other things that matter, and it's important not to lose sight of that.
I I couldn't agree more. And so yeah, I shared a post where I said, it was a post about people taking vacation the week of 4th of July, like all scandalized that people would like, what in the world? Um, but I just feel like for me, sharing stuff like that, I think is important as someone who's been a CMO and a VP and now a president of a company to know that you don't have to give up that fundamental belief that work isn't your whole identity to achieve these types of roles. You work hard, you do good work, whatever, but having that be your entire life is not necessary to be successful. And I think it's really important for people to understand that because I know early in my career, I felt like, well, if I want to be a VP, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to work 80 hours a week, never look up and have no life outside of work. And I just don't think that's true. So I'm really grateful that were able to make that shift in mindset.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say on that point is, there's so many factors outside of your control, when it comes to work, that could like limit your ability to be successful in that role. And that certainly was, I don't control which positions get cut or which ones aren't. And just like helping to refocus about like, okay, well, what actually is within your locus of control, and invest energy in those things, and not do the mental spiral, which I consider myself a highly anxious person. And it's very easy for me to default to the what ifs. Just focus on like what you can actually influence. That's a big shift. It may sound like a small thing, but that's actually a pretty big shift for me, in terms of like how I'm thinking about success and work, and just living a life that allows me to be a fully formed human in all the different aspects of it.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, one last thought is there anything that you would have done differently if you would have known like a layoff was going to come?
There's always things that when you look back that you could have done differently. But I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and materially, I don't think any of the changes that I could have made really would have impacted the outcome. If I could do it all over again, definitely gone to therapy. It's important to just like process that trauma that I was
Hmm.
talking about. And I have people in my life that have helped me with that, but this is going to stick with me for a while. And the other thing, just like from a practical standpoint, you know, had more of a nest egg to protect me when I did lose my job. Luckily for me, it was a very short window. I am very fortunate in the sense that from the point of losing my position to finding a new one, it was only like a couple of months. That's not the case for everyone. So that would be advice that I would share with folks, just making sure that you are doing what you can to save up enough. So if you do find yourself in this position, you're not adding another layer of stress to an already stressful situation.
That is excellent advice. I'm not someone who's like motivated by money, but I know that money gives you freedom and security. And so, being a good saver, it means that you have that nest egg, you have that cushion. You have, in my case, the freedom to quit your job and start something else that is, your passion project or whatever. But, that extra pair of Gucci sunglasses that you really want, that you might need or want that money for something else down the road in a situation that you don't have control over. So I think that's wonderful advice. Joe, if people want to add you to their network, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn would probably be the best place to connect.
Awesome. And as always, listeners, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt. That's Jaime. I'm also on X at Jaime Hunt IMC, JaimeHuntimC. I'm a little bit on TikTok at the Higher Ed CMO. So you can also find me there. And you can find me on my website at solvehighered.com. Please feel free to reach out. I love hearing from people and connecting with people. It's become a passion. So don't hesitate to reach out. And until then, let's go bust some silos. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your host. Learn from Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.